In many cases, it doesn't make sense to require an approval for every request that comes through the system. Perhaps you only want to require approval for those requests that exceed a certain resource size, a specific time duration, or that require some additional special processing or resources. This use case demonstrates how ICO can determine at request time whether or not to require approval based on the characteristics of the submitted request. In this scenario, we will require approval for any deployments that have additional attached volumes selected. In order to do this, we will add a second decision tree to determine if additional volumes have been added as part of the deployment request, and the system will then route it for approval when additional volumes have been requested. So as I described, we'll be bringing in an additional decision gateway, and I'll drop this over here right after the get input parameters, and we'll say this is named storage volumes. And we want to do that before we get approval, so we'll say we want to go from there to there, and I'll add in some additional connections. So if there are storage volumes, we want to request approval. If there are not storage volumes, we will skip over that approval task and go straight to the deploy virtual machine. Now we also need to specify what the parameters will be for checking for specific storage volumes. So I'll click on the storage volumes decision gateway, and I'll go down into the implementation section, and specifically we'll be looking for the tw.local.input parameter object .volumes.listLength. And you can see that I'm using the autocomplete functionality to help me determine where within this variable structure the parameters that I need. So there are lots of different options that we could be using, but in this particular instance I want to know how many volumes were selected by the end user. And you'll notice the decision line that we're looking at right now goes to deploy single virtual machine. So this is looking at this line right here that I've now selected. So if I go back to the implementation, I need to specify what the final condition is. So I want to check and see if there are less than or equal to 0 volumes to deploy a virtual machine. Otherwise, as it shows down here in the default sequence flow, I'll go to sample deploy instance approval and require a manual approval for this particular request. So just as in one of the other videos, I'm going to need to save this, so this will take effect. In order to test this, I will switch over into the IBM Cloud Orchestrator Web UI. And again, you can see I'm logged in as the line of business user. I'll use the self-service catalog, and I'll search for my custom orchestration offering. We'll use the VMware region for this example. I'll provide a server name of conditional approval, change the image to a Red Hat image, and now I'll click Attach Volume. So I'll select the marketing volume since I'm in the marketing department. I'll click back, and now I'll go ahead and click Deploy. So we see the request has been submitted. I'll click on Requests, and we see just as before, we see a task name saying that this needs to be approved and it was assigned to the team approvers. So I'll log out as my line of business user, and I'll log in as my administrator. I'll click on the to-do this time. I'll claim my task, and I'll say no storage volumes, and I'll click reject. So we see the approval request was removed from the inbox. I'll log out, and we can take a look at what that looks like from the line of business user's perspective. We see on the home page that it was rejected. So now let's go ahead and make another request, this time without a storage volume, and it should automatically go through. So again, I'll search for my custom orchestration offering. I'll say no storage. I won't click the attach a volume, and now I'll click deploy. We'll go to the request page, and we see that we're now in the server request. We're now in the process of getting a server. So the system is now past that checkpoint to determine whether or not an approval is required, and is now in the process of provisioning the system. So this would then complete. The user would be able to get access to it just like everything else, but this does show that our conditional approval is indeed working.